Hello and welcome back everyone to yet another lesson in Python programming. In today's lesson we're going to carry on with the development of our SQLite database using Python programming. The focus of today's lesson is inserting data into our database. The objectives for today's lesson is as follows. First, we'll learn how to insert data into our database. Next, we'll move on to visualizing our database records. Up until this point, we really haven't interacted with our database using any special tools, which is what we'll cover in today's lesson. Now, without wasting any more time, let's dive right into our practical and let's continue with the development of our database. So back here in PyCharm, we are basically going to continue with the project where we left off. Notice that I'm not going to be creating a new project in this instance, and that is because our database is located in the lesson 6 folder. If you remember correctly, we initially created our database within this folder. So therefore, it just makes sense to continue development within this project environment. What I will be doing is I'll remove the code for executing the table creation over here. Great. So now we can get started with our insert statements. First, I'll call the connection variable because we do want to execute some SQL code. I'll then call the execute method on this, and then we'll open up a set of parentheses over here. I'll provide some real estate by just giving it a bit of space. And I'm going to start with my insert statement. Note that this is a string that needs to be passed in here. So I'll pass in double quotation marks, and then I'll start with my script. So this is going to be insert into which table? Our employees table. And the columns that we want to add data to needs to be specified within this set of parentheses. So in essence, all we've done so far is we've called the insert into SQL statement. We targeted the table. So we are going to insert some data into our employees table. So now we need to specify the columns. The first column was emp underscore ID for employee ID. The next one is name, department name, as well as the salary. So now that we have the columns that we are targeting, I'll hold down Control, press Enter, then I'll press space and add a backslash so that we can separate the value statement from the insert into statement over here. So now I need to specify the values that I would like to add to my table within these columns. To do that, I can simply just call values, open a new set of parentheses over here, and I can pass in those values. In my first instance, I'm trying to map in a number in my employee ID, so I'll pass in 3 over here. Next, I need to map a name into the next column, and that name is going to be Jack. Also note that this needs to be in quotation marks. That's quite important because you are working with a string in the SQL syntax. And then I'll pass in another string for department name, and this is going to be executive. And then next, I need to pass in the region. So I need to map over a value to the region. I'll simply pass in UK. This also needs to be a string. And then finally, I believe we have the salary over here. So let's be generous with this executive and let's give him a salary of 50,000. Notice that I haven't included quotation marks for the integers over here, and that is because these are not strings in SQL. These are numbers or integers. This is a real number where this is an integer. We know this because real numbers accept decimal points. Great. So now that we've got that down, I'm simply going to clean up my code by bringing the parentheses up over here, and then I'm going to wrap this off with my semicolon. Remember, we are working with SQL, so semicolons are very, very important. Great. So now that I've got one record out of the way, I can simply duplicate all of this for the sake of time, and I'll do this 4 more times because I want to have a table with 4 records inserted into it. The next one over here is going to be employee ID 4 for this record that we're going to insert. The employee name is going to be Alexis, who works in the HR department in UK as well, but she doesn't really earn as much as Jack. So what I'll simply do is decrease the salary, of course, to 32,000. Great. So the next record I'm going to work on is the third one over here. And this is employee ID number 5. Of course, you can pass in your own values if you'd like to. You don't have to replicate my values as is, but feel free if you do want to follow along. Then I'll change this employee's name to Peter, who works in what is probably my favorite department, the technology department. I'll change the region to US, and we'll provide him with a generous $36,000 salary. Lastly, I'm going to do one more record, and that is going to be for employee number 6, whose name is Lois, who works in marketing based in Norway, who also earns a salary but of 25,000. Great, and that's basically it. So what we can expect to have happen here is we are going to insert these records into the table we created in our previous lesson. Notice that I maintained this code over here because we do want to connect and open our database. Make sure that you're also passing in the correct name of the database that you've created. The last couple of lines of code will be a connection dot commit. In SQL, commit just basically means you are committing to the changes made to the database. So in this case, once I've inserted these records and then I commit to those inserts or even updates, and that just basically specifies that this is set in stone. The data now exists. There is no going back, and rolling back is another way to think of it. So I'll then print a simple string over here that says records were inserted. Great. And then we want to, of course, close our connection once we've completed the insert operation. So I'll save this now and let's run our code. Fingers crossed, nothing goes wrong. And there we go. We have the print message which notifies us that the records were inserted. But how exactly do we look at these records? How do we know for certain that they do exist inside of our database? Well, there's a really simple tool that we can actually use to view our database and all the data that's been inserted into our table, our employees table. So let's go ahead and do exactly that. To download the tool, you can simply run a search on DB browser for SQLite. I'm going to opt for the first option. You'll notice there might be a couple of other options for you to use. Feel free to choose any of the tools available that might work. In my case, I'm going to go for DB browser for SQLite. So this is a very simple and straightforward tool that allows you to open and make changes to your database and even create new databases. In our case, since we've created the database through Python, we're going to be using this tool to view the data inside of our database. Also notice that this is an open source tool, and I am a massive fan of open source software. So how exactly do we go about downloading this? If we scroll to the top over here under the download tab, which is where we need to be, we want to download the release specific to our machine. Notice there's a release for Mac OS, for Windows Portable, and I do believe Linux is supported as well. I'm going to opt for the zipped version of Windows. If you want the install version, you can simply click on the standard installer. But because this is a lightweight tool and I don't intend on using it all the time, I am going to opt for the zipped version, which means I can just extract the files within the zip folder to use the software. Now, I've already downloaded this. Once you click on any of these links, the download process should begin. If you opted for the zipped folder version, then this is what the download folder looks like. I'm simply going to right click on this, extract all. I'll extract it within my project folder, my Python source code live folder. Give it a couple of seconds, and this is what we have. So if I can just drag this across slightly, let's close this off. Under DB browser, the new folder which has been extracted is where our client is. So I'll double click on this. And if we scroll, you'll notice we have this client called DB browser for SQLite.exe. And this is the client. This is what I'm going to open. This is what's going to allow me to view my database. So I'll open this up. I'll run this. And I'll drag this slightly over to the side. And then I'll head back to my lesson 6 folder where my database exists. and I'm simply going to drag that in over here, and there we go. And this is the employees table that we created using Python code. This is pretty awesome, I think. So if I expand this, you'll notice this is what my database structure looks like. You'll see a couple of familiar keywords like integer, text, char, real, primary key, for example. If we scroll over, not null, all of these things were done in Python, but now we have a portable database that we can even embed in a mobile application if we wanted to do so. So if I navigate to the Browse Data tab over here, here's the data that we just inserted into our database. Again, I think it's pretty awesome to visualize your data through a piece of software like DB Browser for SQLite, as opposed to trying to pull that data using code in Python, which is what we'll do in our next lesson. And that is it for today's lesson. So just to summarize, throughout this lesson, we learned how to insert data into our previously existing database. We learned how to work with the insert statement to insert data into our table and our overall database. We also learned how to use an open source lightweight software tool to visualize our data and the database structure. In our next lesson, we're going to learn how to manipulate our data by updating the data and selecting and retrieving the data into our Python program. So for all of that and more, I'll see you in the next lesson. Cheers.